It was a stormy night on December 24, 1971, as LANSA Flight 508 flew from Lima to Pucallpa, Peru. The small commercial aircraft, packed with holiday travelers, was making its way over the Peruvian rainforest when it got caught in a violent thunderstorm. Lightning illuminated the sky and the turbulence shook the plane violently. Despite the storm's intensity, the flight continued until disaster struck. Suddenly, a blinding flash of lightning hit the plane. An explosion rocked the aircraft, causing its right wing to break off, and within seconds, LANSA Flight 508 began to disintegrate in mid-air. Juliane Koepcke, a 17-year-old girl, sat frozen in her seat, helpless as the plane fell apart around her. Still strapped to her row of seats, she plummeted over 10,000 feet, spiraling into the dense Amazon jungle below. Amazingly, Juliane survived the fall. She woke up, injured and disoriented, in the middle of one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. With no supplies, a broken collarbone, and severe wounds, she faced an unimaginable battle for survival, alone in the vast, hostile jungle. For 11 grueling days, she fought against hunger, infection, and the dangers of the Amazon. This is her story, the extraordinary survival of the sole survivor of LANSA Flight 508. Juliane Margaret Koepcke was born on October 10, 1954 in Lima, Peru. She was the daughter of renowned German zoologist Hans Wilhelm Koepcke and ornithologist Maria Koepcke. Growing up, Juliane's life was far from ordinary. Her parents, dedicated to the study of wildlife, particularly birds, chose to live and work in Peru, studying its rich biodiversity. Juliane spent much of her childhood in the Amazon jungle, absorbing her parents' love for nature and the knowledge that would one day help save her life. Her father was the director of the Museum of Natural History in Lima, and her mother was a leading expert on South American birds. The Koepcke family lived part-time at the Panguana Research Station in the Amazon rainforest, an experience that left young Juliane deeply familiar with the jungle's plants, animals, and survival strategies. On December 1971, Juliane, then 17 years old, had just completed her schooling and planned to study zoology like her parents. Juliane and her mother, Maria, were scheduled to fly to the remote region of Pucallpa in the Amazon to spend Christmas with her father. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. On December 24, 1971, Juliane and her mother boarded LANSA Flight 508, a Lockheed L-188A Electra turboprop, bound from Lima to Pucallpa. The Peruvian airline had a poor safety record, with 2 fatal accidents in the previous 5 years. However, for Juliane and her mother, there were no other travel options, so they decided to take the risk, despite Maria's apprehensions about flying with LANSA. The flight was packed with 91 passengers, most of whom were traveling to spend the holidays with their families. The aircraft took off, and the first 30 minutes of the journey went smoothly. However, as the plane passed over the Andes Mountains, it encountered severe weather, flying into a thunderstorm. The pilots continued the flight despite the storm's intensity, and the turbulence worsened, rattling the plane violently. Suddenly, at around 12,000 feet, the plane was struck by lightning. One of the fuel tanks exploded, causing the right wing to detach. The aircraft broke apart in mid-air, and the fuselage disintegrated as it plummeted toward the rainforest below. Amid the chaos, Juliane, still strapped to her seat, was ejected from the plane. She plummeted approximately 10,000 feet into the dense rainforest. Unbelievably, she survived the fall, cushioned by the thick canopy of the jungle and possibly the row of seats she was attached to, which may have acted as a parachute, slowing her descent. When Juliane regained consciousness, she found herself alone in the jungle. She had sustained a broken collarbone, deep cuts on her legs and arms, and a swollen eye, but remarkably, she was alive. Even more astonishingly, she wore only a sleeveless mini dress and 1 sandal, having lost the other during the fall. Dazed and disoriented, she lay in the jungle for hours, unable to comprehend what had happened. Her immediate concern, however, was finding her mother, who had been seated next to her. She called out but received no reply. Desperate, she wandered the crash site but found no other survivors. Little did she know at the time, she was the only one. All 90 other passengers and crew had perished, including her mother. Despite the trauma and her injuries, Juliane drew on her jungle knowledge, learned from her parents during their years at the Panguana Research Station. She knew that staying near water would be key to her survival. The Peruvian jungle, dense and treacherous, was teeming with life, but it was also full of deadly creatures, including snakes, piranhas, and insects. She decided to follow the sound of running water, a technique she had learned from her father, who taught her that streams would lead to larger rivers and eventually to civilization. For the next several days, she stumbled through the rainforest, using the one sandal she had left to shuffle her feet and test the ground for dangerous creatures. Her injuries, especially the deep wound in her arm, began to fester, and maggots infested the wound. Dehydration and hunger soon set in. Her only source of food came from candy she had salvaged from the wreckage. For hydration, she drank water from the streams she followed. At night, she would try to find shelter and rest, though sleep was difficult due to the cold, the pain, and the fear of predators lurking nearby. Juliane's knowledge of the jungle allowed her to identify toxic plants and animals, and despite her physical suffering, she remained calm and focused. After several days, she encountered wreckage from the crash, including bodies still strapped into their seats. The sight was horrifying, but Juliane realized that she was the only one alive. It reinforced her determination to survive. On the 10th day of her journey, Juliane reached a larger river. Her strength was failing, and she was on the verge of collapse. Floating in the river, she came across a canoe moored along the riverbank. She knew she was close to civilization. Nearby, she found a small hut and waited there, too weak to continue. Soon after, local loggers found her. They initially thought she was a water spirit, as her emaciated appearance was so otherworldly. Once they realized she was a survivor, they tended to her wounds and transported her down the river to a nearby village. From there, she was flown to a hospital in Pucallpa, where she was reunited with her father. Juliane was the only survivor of the LANSA Flight 508 crash. Her survival was deemed a miracle, and her story captivated the world. The search for the wreckage had been called off, with authorities assuming that all aboard the flight had died. Juliane's emergence from the jungle 11 days after the crash was nothing short of extraordinary. The aftermath of the disaster left Juliane with deep emotional scars. She had lost her mother and endured unimaginable hardship, but she remained resilient. Following her recovery, she returned to Germany and continued her education. Like her parents, she pursued a career in zoology, earning her PhD and later returning to Peru to work at the Panguana research station. Juliane never sought fame from her survival story, but her ordeal became the subject of many articles, books, and documentaries. Werner Herzog, the famed German filmmaker who had narrowly missed boarding the same ill-fated flight, later made a documentary about her story, titled Wings of Hope. Herzog's film recounts Juliane's survival and includes a return to the crash site, a deeply emotional journey for her. Juliane Koepcke's survival is one of the most remarkable in history. Her knowledge of the rainforest, her calm in the face of extreme adversity, and her will to live allowed her to overcome impossible odds. Her story has inspired many people worldwide, both as a tale of individual resilience and as a testament to the power of human endurance in the face of nature's wrath. Today, Juliane Koepcke continues her work as a zoologist, focusing on conservation efforts in the Amazon rainforest. The Panguana research station, where she spent her childhood and where her survival skills were honed, is still operational, with Juliane at the helm. The station has become an important center for ecological research and wildlife preservation. Juliane's story is not just about survival, it is about the profound connection between humans and nature.
Thank you for watching this video. Hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more interesting videos.